You're listening to Mystic Magic. My name is Celeste A. Frazier, and I'm your hostess. Welcome to episode 6, Daddy's Girl, the power of women unleashed. And are we going to have fun today with the perfect person with whom to explore this topic, Reverend JudyAnn Young, my friend, my prayer partner, an amazing woman. She is a pioneer in the oil pipeline of Alaska. First female, African-American female hired for this project. She's an insurance business owner. She's a motorcycle enthusiast. She's a loving wife, mother, and grandmother. She is a restorative justice facilitator. She is a wedding minister, and she is a children's advocate. She's adventurous. She's been everywhere from the Great Wall to the rainforests of Ghana to the Edmund Pettus Bridge. It's going to be a good one, folks. Stay tuned. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirits to understand our lives. Hey there, Mystic Magic podcasters. Are we going to have fun today? My good friend, Reverend JudyAnn Young, is with us today. She's an awesome speaker. She's a wonderful community activist. She's a great wife, a wonderful mother and grandmother. She's a wedding minister. She's traveled all over the world. She's been on the Edmund Pettus Bridge, and she's been walking the Great Wall of China. She was the first woman in the oil industry on the Alaska pipeline. She has lived. She is truly the definition of today's topic, Daddy's Girl. And I mean that by she is truly exemplary of powerful women unleashed. So please, let's have and welcome Reverend JudyAnn Young. Hey, girl.
Hey, how are you, Reverend Celeste?
I'm good.
It's an honor to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
I appreciate that. Hey, you told me that you were a daddy's girl. Tell me more about that.
As far back as I can remember, I have always had an affinity and attraction for male energy. So I was definitely a daddy's girl. I was an uncle girl. I was a little sister to a big brother. And these were my idols. They were the ones that I looked to and turned to and felt protected by. So yes, I was definitely a daddy's girl.
But you were by no means kind of demure. You're pretty fierce, lioness. And so I know you pretty good. And the way that you carry your power for good, I'm grateful for. Here's what I want to know. How do you choose your work and play? You live pretty fearlessly. And what does it mean to you to live out loud?
Wow, several questions. How do I choose my work and play? I can honestly say I've always chosen what felt right. I have been a person that has lived intuitively from my feeling place, meaning if it felt like that was something I needed to do, or there was something cosmically drawing me to something, then I would go and do that. And if you asked me if I had planned my life to work in the oil industry, I would tell you no. I actually got into the oil industry not knowing that I was going to be the first African-American female with BP, and that I was integrating the technical side of the oil industry. I didn't know it until I showed up and there was no one that looked like me. And I said, oh, this is interesting. But it was not unnerving because I grew up in a predominantly white environment in Anchorage, Alaska. So I was used to being, quote, the only one. And when I showed up in the oil industry, I realized that if you put racism and sexism in a bag and shake it up, they would hit the table at the same time. There's a very thin line between racism and sexism. And
so you had to experience both of those in that situation.
absolutely, absolutely. I experienced that you're taking a good job from a man that needs to take care of his family. And as a woman of color, a single mother, I was like, well, I need to take care of my family.
Mm-hmm.
And that was an interesting perspective. And to hear a man, one day he had this aha moment and he turned to me and he said, you know, you're the first Black woman I've ever talked to. And I thought that was an interesting question. And I kind of chuckled and I said, well, what do you think? He said, women are women, apparently. And I said, yeah, they are. Women are women. There's some subtle differences.
Well, you also were in the insurance business too, right? Didn't you have a business in insurance?
Yes, I owned an insurance agency for 12 and a half years. And again, when I went into that industry, I didn't realize there were so few women in the industry until I went to our first regional meeting and I looked around the room and there were maybe 123 agents there and less than 5 of them were women. And there were only 2 other women of color. And what I realized after that is if you follow the money, you're going to find fewer and fewer minorities and fewer women. So I've always had good paying career fields and choices, but I didn't let that stop me. While I was working in the oil industry, I was making a very good living, working 6 months out of the year, a week on, a week off. I still went to school, and I went to school before you could do it like you're doing it now. And going to school, and people were saying, well, why are you finishing your degree? Because looking down the road, I knew that an education was paramount for me. So I let the oil industry pay for my bachelor's degree.
Wonderful.
Yes.
So listen,
So I took advantage of the situation.
Yeah, but you're pretty tireless and fearless when it comes to community service, and you exemplify service in a way that's exemplary and impressive. What is it that drives you to be in service? Was there joy or freedom? What is it that makes you feel, that service is for you? You've been with children in elementary schools as well as felons in federal prison.
What has drawn me is, as I know that I came to this life, this planet, to be of service. That's the feminine energy in me, is to be of service. And to be of service not to myself, but to the greater good of all. And I happened into, again, it was a feeling. I was volunteering at the school as part of a club. And after the second or third week, I realized I was there as a sacred servant. Mm-hmm. That was part of my assignment. See, I've not been anywhere, Celeste, that wasn't part of my assignment.
Right.
Looking back, I'll be like, yeah, okay, I needed to be there. And when I worked in, and I, not growing up with a lot of Black classmates, it was exciting to go and work in an inner city school in Las Vegas, mm-hmm. where we had a lot of homeless children, children in foster care, children below the poverty line. And I realized why a lot of us aren't making it as adults, because our community, our parents, our environment failed us as children. So I've done things with these kids, these 5th graders who are 11 years old. For Christmas, instead of giving them a toy, I created journals for them. And they were, well, what do I do with a journal? And I said, you capture your dreams and your aspirations and your thoughts, and you document it, because one day you're going to need to look back and say, this has been my journey.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, are they going to get this? Well, after Christmas break, I asked them, have you all used those journals? And they began to rave them frantically, wanting to show me their artwork and poetry and their raps. And I realized, yes, I'm in the right place.
Yes. Well, what about being with offenders that have been pretty violent and bringing your level of support there? How is that?
Again, a divine appointment. Many years ago, probably 12 years ago, I worked for the Neighborhood Justice Center as a volunteer mediator. And you would have people come in with differences, whether it was a barking dog, or a dry cleaners that shrunk your favorite shirt. And so I would sit and listen at these stories and help them build a bridge where they could hear each other. So later, I was invited to attend some mediation training at a different level, where they were holding circles. And circles are an indigenous process of a group of people sitting in a circle with a talking stick and discussing what's going on with them. And I went through this training, and the organization is the Ahimsa Collective. And Ahimsa means to do no harm. And they do restorative justice training in the Bay Area. So I went through the training, and they work in several prisons. It's all voluntary. And we have these circles with violent offenders. These violent offenders have to actually be interviewed to come into the program. And when the first time I went to a circle meeting there, I sat beside an offender, and he said, well, what do you do? And I said, I'm a science and mind minister. And he looked at me and he said, really? I said, yes. He said, I get the Science of Mind magazine. And I said, you're kidding me. And he described two women on the cover, and they happened to be Petra and Karen Fry. And he ran to his room at lunchtime and brought the magazine back. And I said, again, I'm in the right place doing the right thing. Mm-hmm. And what I learned about working with violent offenders, when they go to court for whatever offense they've created, they talk about the offense, which is actually the reaction. But they don't talk about the cause that oftentimes started in childhood.
Sure. Abuse, right?
Through abuse and neglect and poor education and poverty and all of these other things. Well, these offenders, to come into the program, first thing they have to do is take full responsibility for what they did. They can't come in and say, I was framed. Mm-hmm. They have to be committed to doing their own work. And they have to write and tell the harm they caused another.
Right.
Now, and they also have to tell the harm that was done to them.
Yes.
Now, I learned a lot about how the children and the violent offenders are more alike than you would think they are.
You mentioned this one guy who was participating in the program, and he had no possibility of parole. Can you tell me more about him?
Yes, his name is Wes. I'm using his name because he asked me to. This man performed a heinous crime, and it resulted in a child being killed. Mm. And after I heard his story from him, and he said, you know, I'm here with no possibility of parole. And I said, Wes, what made you take this program? Why? And he looked at me, he said, I don't have to be a prisoner in my mind. I want to be a better person. Yeah. It doesn't matter whether I'm in here and I never see the outside world. I want to be a better person. I want to support other prisoners that are not here on life sentences to get out and never come back. So he became a peer counselor for addictions, and he was stellar in this program and learning and training to be a facilitator.
Okay.
And I looked at him and I realized, he said, because I'm here, I don't have to be a prisoner in my mind.
Yes. Wow. Well, you've not been a wallflower by any stretch of the imagination. You've been on some motorcycles in your day, and you still are, right? What is it that
Absolutely.
makes you feel so at home on a bike?
The most profound conversations I've had with the Holy Spirit have been in the open air on a motorcycle. I've known since 1985 that I wanted to ride. So it took a few years, but I never let go of that flicker, that dream, that aspiration. So I started riding over 20 years ago. And there were not very many female riders back then. And as time went on, again, I was always guided to be where I needed to be. A lady came up with, and she was a breast cancer survivor. She wanted to do a ride across America to raise awareness and money for breast cancer research. And several people called me and said, this lady's out of the Bay Area. You've got to do this ride. And after the third person contacted me, I called her and said, I want to do it. And she says, well, you need to raise X number of dollars. And need I say, with my husband's support, I raised a lot of money. We started out on a 25-state tour. Well, things unraveled in Texas, and I left the group. And there were 6 of us out there. And the other 3 women decided to go with me because it wasn't working the way she was doing it. So I said, we've taken this money. We've committed to this event. We're going to follow that route. Mm-hmm. And I rode through 25 states, 27 days, living off our motorcycles. We had hotel rooms. People took us in. So we went from California down to Texas, over to Florida, up to ground zero in New York. A friend of mine in New Jersey put us up for a few days. We got our bike service and we headed back across the United States. Well, in the meantime being, I had done a lot of interpersonal work. And I was wondering, why am I taking this ride? And it was more about the journey and the oneness with Holy Spirit, being out there, being in service, being a leader. And none of these women had ever been out of the state of California on a bike. I was the only one who had ever ridden across country. Now, mind you, this was before we had GPSs on our cell phones. Mm-hmm. We had old school road maps. But fortunately for us, we had the right combination of talents to make this. One of the women had mechanical skills. Someone else had medical training. Someone else was a peacemaker. And all of this supported us across these states. And to this day, we're all still friends.
Now, you started off thinking, well, I don't want to just write $1,000 check for the breast cancer initiative. You want to be a part of something bigger. And I'm sure y'all raised a whole lot more than $1,000 during that ride.
Yes, we did. We did. I personally raised over $5,000.
All right. Now, I know that you have described, and I can't even imagine what it's like, just being on the bike with God and going through different terrains. Can you say more about that?
Riding a motorcycle is a great metaphor for life, because when you're riding, especially on roads that you're not familiar with, you're going to come into a curve that's going to be more of a curve than you thought it would be. But instead of panicking and hitting your brake, you just ease off the throttle and let it pull you through the curve. That's a metaphor for life. You know, you can't panic every time life throws you a curveball. You just ease off and look where you want to go. Rule number one about riding a motorcycle, don't look at where you are because you're sure to fall off that bike. Look where you want to go. So coming into the curves, you look through the curve where you want to go. Keep your eye on the horizon. Mm-hmm. You're going to ride through all types of weather. I rode in 120 degrees coming through Phoenix, got to the other side of Albuquerque, New Mexico, and hit a hailstorm. Mm. And it requires a whole different level of riding. It means you're no longer riding 75 miles an hour. It means you drop your speed down to 25 miles an hour, put on your emergency flashers, pull your body in, and you become small and you become one with the bike.
Yes.
See, that's it with life. You have to become one with life. There's no, any true biker will tell you, there's a point when you're riding, and as you learn to ride, you're learning how to balance it, how to make turns, but there comes a point when you become one with the bike, and that's life. When you stop fighting and resisting and you become one with it, there is no us and them. There is no me and the bike. There's only one of us. And that's when you hit the sweet spot.
You seem to have it all figured out. And you remain an adventurous woman. Now, you've hiked through the rainforest and you walked the Great Wall of China, and you've also walked the Edmund Pettus Bridge. And you've raised money for causes that you believed in and fed the hungry and comforted the children. What is leading you? What is guiding you or driving you to do that?
Great question. A lot of what guides me is I don't want my life to be in vain. I have 11 grandchildren. I don't want any of them to have an excuse not to go out and live life to its fullest. So I can't tell them that. I have to show them that. Mm-hmm. And I've always been a sacred servant. Walking the Edmund Pettus Bridge, I had seen the movie Selma, and then the opportunity came up, and I was invited from a friend of mine who lives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, to come out and represent. Well, he extended the invitation to all the Buffalo Soldiers. Well, I was the only one from the West Coast, and I went to Alabama, and we rode in that 50th anniversary March on Selma parade. And afterwards, there were literally thousands of people walking across the bridge. And it was important to me. It was important to me as a woman of color to be a part of that movement 50 years later, so that my ancestors and those that have gone on before me realize that they have not been forgotten, that their journey has not been in vain. So as I crossed that bridge, I just broke out into tears, wondering what was it like 50 years before me. Mm-hmm. And 50 years from now, my great-grandchildren will be doing wonderful things, and they will look at the legacy and the life that I've led, and they'll say, my great-grandmother was a bad mother. Shut your mouth. Because I will have done the things that I needed to do. And you never know who's watching you. I have friends that will never ride motorcycles, never cross the Edmund Pettus Bridge, never walk through a rainforest in Ghana, West Africa. But what they do is they live vicariously through me. And they are truly the wind beneath my wings. They tell me, keep going. You're doing it for all of us. So whatever I do, it's never about me. It's for the greater good.
Well, you are certainly an expression of the power of women unleashed, Reverend JudyAnn. And I know that we've whet the appetite for our audience to find out about projects or events that they want to support or ways that they can experience more of you. What would you like us to know? And what would you like for us to pay attention to?
I'm going to say this to all of us have someone that we know that's incarcerated. This is what I will say to you. If you have a relative that is in prison for whatever reason, don't be ashamed. You don't have to like their behavior, but support their humanness.
Mm-hmm.
Visit them, because those visits are sometimes the lifeblood of people that are serving long sentences. Visit them, write them a letter, tell them what's going on with the family, because they're living vicariously through you. Encourage them to keep doing their work. Support them. I don't care how many times they fall down. I had a cousin that was a drug addict. She fell down and went through rehab 9 times, and she finally got it. Don't write people off. We can't write our children off. People, many of us talk about where our youth are. You don't have to save the whole neighborhood. Take one child, find one child in your community and teach them something. Don't say, well, they're disrespectful. Teach them something.
Yes.
If you're a man, teach them how to tie a tie. I can't tell you how many young men do not know how to tie a tie.
Mm-hmm.
How many little girls do not know that they are more than just their collective body parts. If nothing else, when you see them, especially if their pants are hanging down, love them enough until they pull their pants up. They're only doing what they know to do.
Right. Well, I am knowing that this has been an inspiration for many people. I am so glad that you came on to Mystic Magic today. I am knowing that you'll continue to be a blessing to everyone as you've been a blessing to me. I love you. I appreciate you. And I am so looking forward to the continued expressions of Reverend JudyAnn.
Thank you, Reverend Celeste. And if you're an educator out there and you have children of color, please follow the works of Dr. Jawanza Kunfuju, and that's Kunfugu. He specializes in educating children of color. It is so worth it. And if you're a man, consider elementary education as a career field. We need you. We really do.
Okay, we'll have that in the show notes. This is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirits to understand our lives. This is entitled Go to God. It's an original poem that I wrote, and I just found it recently. When there's someone you grieve and it's hard to believe, go to God. When your spirit seems lost and the world seems tossed, seek God. When the thought of being whole seems much too bold, trust God. When your home is full of strife and you don't like your life, talk to God. When your heart is breaking and your smile is what you're faking, listen for God. Because God is always near. God is always here. In your joy and in your pain, in the sun and in the rain, God is there. God is care. Go to God. Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Celeste A. Frazier, and this is Mystic Magic. We'll be back next week when our topic will be Grace Underwater. And our special guest will be the delightful Reverend Stacy Hilton. We'll be exploring grace and water, that pure potentiality, that space and place where sometimes some negative things come up, but that's where grace meets us. Reverend Stacy is charming, transparent, open. Do be with us next week for our episode 7. Reach out to mysticmagic.buzzsprout.com for more podcasts. And you can also find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and many more podcast venues. Till next time, this is Mystic Magic, exploring our spirit to understand our lives.